Alrighty, time for number 22. Today's Thursday, October 14th, 2021. And today I'm talking about feminism because I believe more than half of my new subscribers would identify as feminists. So what better way to welcome these new subscribers in than to have a man explain feminism? So I don't have anything particularly interesting to say about this, nothing new, I think. I'm just going to explain my own thought process, and you can tell me where I'm wrong or where you disagree. I'm just going to try and say what I believe about the entire concept, which is, this is a tough one. I briefly skimmed the Wikipedia page before this, and oh my god, it's long, and there's a history, and I don't think the very first sentence isn't necessarily well defined. It's not easily defined because it just said feminism is a collection of movements. And I mean, that's already, what does that mean, a collection of movements? Which movements are feminism and which ones aren't? I was reading a little bit about that, and in the 80s, there's post-feminism, and feminists will disagree about which things are feminist or not. I think that there's a lot of disagreement within the movements. So, yeah, well, I'm here to give you my take. We'll see what happens. I don't really know how I'm going to approach this. I would appreciate constructive criticism, because I will likely get some things wrong. I mean, I'm vaguely familiar with the waves. I didn't know the Me Too movement counted as a wave. That turns out that's the fourth wave of feminism, so there you go. Real quick, yeah, when I was talking about Over It, I said it was female only, and that was wrong. And Ella Androphobia, the YouTube user, pointed that out to me. I just straight up didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know anybody could join Over It. So I would appreciate if those same users would be constructive in their criticism. Tell me where I'm wrong. And don't be mean about it, please. Thank you. So, when I think about feminism, when I think about... to me, it's largely about the relationship between men and women. Because I don't think you can really... does feminism exist in a world of only women? If the universe, if I just deleted all men, if everybody woke up tomorrow, there's no more men, what happens to feminism? Does it just does it go away? It seems like feminism has to exist in relation to men. If you were to take away all the men, is feminism just indistinguishable from liberalism? I guess that's a good question. In what sense is liberalism different from feminism? Is feminism a subset of liberalism? Liberalism would say equality under the law. Feminism wants equality under the law between men and women. But I think feminism also wants different things than just... It's not just about what's under the law. I wouldn't say that feminism is a subset of liberalism. They're definitely related in some way. To me, liberalism kind of precedes feminism, but I might be wrong about that. That's kind of how I think about it. Anyway, so the relationship between men and women is fundamentally different than the relationship between, say, something like two races, right? I could theoretically go somewhere in history where you would be born in a place where you would pretty much have almost no interaction with people of a different race, so it's not something you'd think about. But I can't go anywhere in history where there was no relationship between men and women. There's always been... This has been a thing for forever, since the beginning of human history, the beginning of mammalian history, really. So, yeah, sex is, 500 million years old in evolutionary time? It predates all of us, so I think that's what makes this such a difficult issue, is that you can't really talk about solving or fixing. You can't even talk about the relationship without bringing up our animalistic instincts, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I think you have to include the evolutionary stance in your discussion. And I think that, what's funny about the whole transgender, trans rights movement is that this denial of the biological difference between men and women, I think probably started with feminism. Because the feminists wanted equal rights, and part of their argument was, hey, we are exactly the same as men, right? And I think that sort of got taken too seriously, or too literally, by some subsection of the feminists, and they still seem to be in denial that there are any differences. Because, there's the obvious differences. There's like the physical, men are on average taller, on average more upper body strength. Like, those are the easy ones. All the secondary sex characteristics, facial hair and things like that. That's different. But then I think you get into this tricky territory where you talk about, okay, we have physical differences, but what about emotional differences? What about mental differences? Does that happen between men and women? From what I understand, women at least have the capacity to be just as smart as men. I don't really, I was going to save IQ and the concept of IQ for a different video, because I think you could talk about IQ for a long time. But from what I have seen, men and women have on average the same IQ. I have also seen that it's possible that men have a greater diversity in IQ, meaning that you'll get more idiots, but you'll also get more geniuses in the male population than the female population. I'm not 100% sure about that. That's not part of my worldview necessarily. But when it comes to these kinds of things, because you can also look up personality differences, and it seems like it's the same sort of it seems reasonable just to begin with that there would be personality differences, and it's mainly, just if you think about how we're born and raised, wow, this gets complicated so fast. You got to talk about, to what degree do we have inborn differences, and to what degree are our differences a result of our upbringing? That's, the nature versus nurture conversation, and I'm not about to solve that today, I'm not about to lay that out. There are studies on personality differences between men and women, and they do show that there are some variations in our temperament. We have temperamental differences, but it's mostly overlapping. And I think if you look at the most extremes, like the best example is, you take the 10 most aggressive people in the population, and 9 out of 10 of them are men. And it's because on average, men and women probably have about the same aggression. It's like close to the same. But then if you take the most extremely aggressive people, it's more likely to be a man. Which I think is kind of a huge part of the feminist conversation, because it seems like a lot of what feminists talk about is this is part of the whole gender critical movement, and the idea that they're trying to kick trans women, or they're trying to keep trans women out of their spaces because those are men. And part of that is there's a physical difference that's just important. Like in every interaction between a man and a woman, there's in some sense, the man has an option that the woman doesn't have at almost all times, I guess, if you consider the physical attack a kind of an option in that interaction. Then you would want to, wow, Maybe I bit off more than I can chew on this one. Yeah, it's just such a huge issue. And then you got feminists that talk about patriarchy, and that gets really complicated because some arguments I've heard will look back at history and characterize it as a patriarchy. And to what extent is that true, and to what extent is that a mischaracterization? I think it depends on what exactly you mean by patriarchy. Because, I mean, obviously, positions of power have been held mostly by men throughout all of history. You look at the priesthood class of ancient Egypt, it's all men, I think. I might have that wrong, but I think in general, whether the structure is religious, whether it's a capitalist structure, whether it's some kind of government structure, it's always men tend to occupy positions of power. And there are exceptions where there are women, but to me, if you're saying patriarchy, that is what I think of is, okay, the people in the powerful positions tend to be men, and you could call that a patriarchal system. But I don't see that as being a result of just men being, like, that's not a result of the physical differences between men and women. It's not just because men are stronger that they just occupy a Senate position or something. It's more complicated than that. It's more subtle. It's deeper. There's a, I don't think it's right to call all of history oppressive. I don't think it's right to say that men were oppressing women. I think it's more reasonable to say that society was oppressing women overall. And you could say that, okay, society is male dominated, so it's kind of like men are oppressing women, but men were also oppressing men. So it wasn't all of the men oppressing all of the women. I think it was some of the men oppressing everybody else. So that's an important difference, a very important difference. You can't blame men for the problem. You can blame a subsection of men, maybe. And what is the problem exactly? That's a good question. What is the problem? What do feminists want? They want equal rights. They got equal rights in the 20s, I think. What year did women get to vote? 1916? 20 something? I have no idea. I should know that. After that, what do they want? They want equal representation in the workplace, but in some workplaces they have over equal representation. Teaching and medicine, I guess. I don't know, at this point, my question is mainly, what do feminists want? Some of them want to destroy the gender roles, which I think is more dangerous than they seem to think. I get the sense that we need gender roles to keep us sane. If you don't have a role, then what are you doing? You're just making it up? You're just making up how to live life? Like, you could do that, I guess, but I think we all agree that a 2-parent household is better than a 1-parent household, better than a 0-parent household. So it's better to have 2 people team up to raise kids than it is to have a single mom or a single father. Which means men and women, I mean, I'm being heteronormative here. Because most people are heterosexual. Most relationships are going to be between men and women. I get that 2 gay guys can raise a kid too, or 2 lesbians. But for the sake of this conversation, I think I'm just talking about the relationship between men and women. And it seems like there's been a traditional structure made by traditional gender roles. But we sort of need to renegotiate because things have changed a little bit. First of all, women have access to reproductive technology now. They can stop from having a baby if they want, which I think was kind of the big turning point. That and other technologies that just reduce the amount of work that women have to do, or were traditionally supposed to do. Washing machines and these things. And it's freed up all this time for men and women. And so I think the the nature of relationships is changing, has changed. And we just have to be careful about throwing out all of the norms. I think you got to keep some of the norms. To me, it's a renegotiation. Like there was a kind of agreed upon, maybe I shouldn't say agreed upon, there was kind of a structure that society generally accepted. And if you deviated too far from that structure, you were punished by society. But that has changed now. I mean, it's changing so rapidly. It's almost scary how fast it's changing. And I think that these people that just completely throw the roles out the window, I think are running into consequences as well. And, you just got to be careful. Yeah, I really didn't have a plan going into this video, in case you can't tell. I really didn't have a plan. Feminism is not necessarily something I think about that much. I think about racism. I think about racial issues a lot more than I think about feminist issues, I think. Possibly. Although I do. I mean, I have a mom. I date women. I don't have any sisters. And I've yet to have a daughter, but maybe someday I will. So it's obviously something I need to think about. I just, yeah, I think I agree with the basic premise of equal rights, but I just disagree with so many of the people, so much of the solutions. Like some of the stuff that feminists want, like one thing that, okay, here's one issue that I have, is this believe all women. This was part of the fourth wave, I think. This is part of the Me Too movement. So what is believe all women? That is a phrase that popped up. And the intention of it, I think, like the charitable interpretation of it, is that you want to believe victims in a victims of sexual abuse. And in a courtroom scenario, they're trying to say like, okay, it gets so wacky because it's like, they clearly don't mean believe all women literally, right? It doesn't really literally mean those three things, because if we believed all women, then what's to stop a woman from coming up to me and being like, hey, you owe me $10,000? And I go, what? And she goes, yeah, remember you gave me $10,000 a year ago? Or I give you $10,000, now you owe me? And I'd be like, did you? And then like, wait, I have to believe her. So like, okay, that's obviously not what the believe all women people are saying, right? Like that's a ridiculous interpretation. But technically those three words do allow for, like, why can a woman not walk into a bank and say, hey, my bank account has $10,000 in it right now? And if they believe all women, then she must be lying. I mean, she must be telling the truth. She's not lying. So I guess it's the same thing with BLM, Black Lives Matter. It's three words where the interpretation of it is, like, this is going to sound a little ridiculous probably, but in what sense would Black lives not matter? Like, what exactly are you saying? Because, like, matter, what does the matter part of that mean? Like, even if you're a neo-Nazi and you want to kill all the black people, Black lives still matter. Like, you're still thinking about them. You'd almost have to be, you'd have to not know that black people exist. You have to be like an atheist of black people to not think Black lives matter. Because, like, just their existence is matter, right? The fact that they exist in your brain means they matter. They're part of your universe. But obviously that's not the intention of those three words. Obviously. Like, the intention is different than what the three words mean. So that's why believe all women throws me for a loop, because it's like, that's clearly not what you mean. You don't mean believe all women. You mean something else. I think the whole Me Too movement was a little bit... Oh, man. Well, here's why I'll get in trouble with my audience. I think Louis C.K. was unfairly canceled. I mean, he did something wrong. He was definitely a creepy guy. He definitely jerked off in front of some women, and he probably, according to his side of the story, he did ask for consent, and they did say yes, but there's always the power dynamic thing. I think his cancellation, maybe, he has served his time by now. He should have been punished, but not end of career punished. Like, I look forward to him coming back. I don't think he deserves infinite punishment for his crimes. I'll say that. I don't know if that gets me in trouble with the feminist. We'll see. We'll see. I'm sure I'll find out in the comment section. All right, what else do I have to say? What else do I have to say about this? When exactly does it end? What is the end of feminism? If you had a perfect 50-50 representation in every organization everywhere and you had a complete removal of gender roles, would that be the end of it? And the thing is do you want a complete removal of gender roles? Because at a certain point you have to acknowledge the fact that women can't have a baby any faster than 9 months. And that just fundamentally, that's just a fundamental difference between the lives of a woman and the lives of men. It's just, I mean, until we have amazing technology where we can grow babies in jars or whatever, that's going to be a thing. And so it's going to be a decision that women will have to make in relationship to their careers. It's just we're playing different games, really. And we have to play these games together, so we have to figure out the rules together, but you can't just get rid of all the rules. You have to have some rules to this game. There needs to be rules for how we date each other and how we choose each other and how we raise kids together, how we, in a marriage, you have to think about who's going to do what. It's not women have to do the dishes, men are mowing the lawn. Like, that's not a thing anymore. But the thing is the dishes still have to get cleaned and the lawn still has to get mowed. So somebody's got to do this stuff. And so you're going to have to negotiate. And maybe it's just individual to every couple. But there's got to be some general rules that we could draw across society that would make sense. I don't know what those rules are. Let me think about it. All right, well, here, this brings up another thing. This is actually something that's pretty interesting to me. So I saw a comic once. I hope I haven't lost people's attention by now. I know that this one is not one of my better videos. I know that already, but I saw this comic once, and it shows this. It's a 4-panel comic, and let me just explain it really fast. There's a character in this who's clearly a blue-haired kind of SJW feminist, right? And she's walking around in society and seeing different things happen. So she's like walking down the street and she gets catcalled, and it shows her being upset. And then it's her at work and some guy's like mansplaining something, and then she's upset. I don't remember what the third one is. It's basically it shows a girl being upset with being treated a certain way by men. And then the 4th panel in the comic is her having sex with a guy, and the guy's calling her like a slut, and sort of being dominant, right? And then she's clearly very turned on by it. She goes, yeah, like, that's me, right? And so I think that women are in this position now where they want equality. They want, the feminist idea is that there is equality and that you would treat a man the same as you would treat a woman. But the thing is, sexually, you don't want that. Sexually, and I'm not saying this is all women, like, don't misquote me here. But generally, to me, in terms of sex, it seems like there's usually a dominance-submission kind of relationship, and it's not always the man dominant, woman submissive, but generally, as like an extremely general rule, I'm not saying it's true for everybody, but generally it seems like, you can just check out porn and you'll see that mostly it's a dominant man with a submissive woman. And it seems like that's kind of that must be what we want, right? Generally. Please, let me say generally, right? I'm not saying this is true across the board, but it seems like sexually in the bedroom, women are turned on by dominant men, in many cases. This has been my experience, at least, but I have limited experience. I don't know everything, and to me that seems like a very That's a very tricky thing to deal with as a woman. How do you deal with the fact that you want equal rights, but then you're turned on by something that's not necessarily reflective of that? That seems to be a very real issue that women are dealing with right now. And when I say dominant submission, I don't mean, like, to me, I've always found this, and I think this is true in gay culture too, between two men. I think that there's usually an element of dominance and submission in most sexual encounters. And I say generally, again, it's not always true. Sometimes it's perfectly reciprocal. Sometimes you could call it equal, I guess. You could say that it's just an intimate connection between two people. But there tends to be a theme that comes out in sex, and I think that it is a sort of, it's a power dynamic. There's a power difference. And I've seen it in gay culture as well between men. There's usually a dominant man and a submissive man. When it comes to lesbians, I have no idea. Lesbians are a wonderful mystery to me. But, yeah, what was I talking about? So this sexual thing that turns on men and women, right? Like men, I'm not saying all men, but some men, most men probably, are turned on by being dominant. And you kind of know that that's not feminist, right? Like, how does feminism play into the bedroom? I think that's just a question worth asking. There's clearly unhealthy behaviors that can pop up, but you know, wow, I've gone way off the rails, but I tend to see sex as there's similarities between dancing and sex, where there will be like a lead and a follow. So it's not necessarily dom sub, but it's very much one person's in charge, one person's following. That's not always true. It's not always man in charge, woman in you know, I know I'm going to get like misquoted. Somebody's going to clip out this one little thing where I can't really stop that. But yeah, there's this, and I think that what turns us on comes from deep within us. It's like from our animalistic background. I think that we are sexually turned on by things that have been there since before humans existed. And how that plays into the relationship between men and women and how that plays into feminism is probably a very gigantic subject you could talk about for a long time. I'm sure people have studied it. And on that note, I should probably get to the end of this video. I know that I've said a lot and probably said things people will not like. I look forward to being told what's up in the comment section. I had no idea that over it was anybody was allowed in. I really thought it was just female only. Ella Androphobia told me that. Fear of men. Androphobia. Fear of men. I think that's what that means. It's a wildly complicated issue. Wildly complicated. I think that it has gone a little too far in some places, the feminist movement. You know, I don't know if you can necessarily characterize all of history as women were just slaves or owned by men. I don't think that necessarily accurately describes it. For things that I've already said, for reasons I've already said. It's just not true that all men were dominating all women. It's more like a small subset of people were dominating everybody else. Because, like, you know, all of the obvious things that you've already heard probably is that men were more likely to die in violent, horrible ways because of war and, well, I don't know if that's true. I just know that it wasn't necessarily fun to be a guy either in most of history. So it's not like men were just chilling while women were doing all the work, right? Like, that's not true. It seems like society's been oppressive to both sexes for a long time. And maybe only now we've reached the enlightened age of equality and democracy and liberalism, really. It's just liberalism. That's what it always comes back to for me, liberalism. How do we make sure how do we treat everybody as if they're equal? And that's really, you know, as long as feminism stays on that road, treat everybody as they're equal, then I think I'm all right with it. And on that note, I'm done. Bye.